Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before I get to our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Angie Burke on the podcast. She's coming to us all the way from Southern Ontario in Canada, one of the many Canadian guests that we've had on. She's an author as well as a registered nurse, but she's also a stroke survivor who lifts, and she just has such an inspiring story that I'd love to have her share with everyone else on that listens to this podcast. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Angie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, well, before we get started talking about your story, what is the weather like in Southern Ontario today?
It's sunny. It's a little cool, but it has been a very hot and humid summer, so I greatly appreciate it being able to have the windows open and some fresh air.
I was gonna say it's a little cloudy up here, but it's nice weather, and for someone with my skin color, I mean, it's very nice that it's cloudy. I mean, so I got to put an SPF of about 1 million on if I walk outside, so it works its way out. But why don't you give us to start off? Why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory on what inspired you to adapt this healthy and fit lifestyle and get into shape?
Okay, so my answer to this question is probably going to be one of the strangest ones you've heard, but I was living a typical lifestyle. Nowadays, I was a registered nurse working shift work. I was frequently taking courses. My husband and I had 2 children. So I spent most of my life feeling like I was getting pulled in 10 different directions. And then, unfortunately, September 23rd of 2013, as the result of a carotid dissection, I suffered a large stroke. And ironically, that is what led me to a lifestyle of fitness and nutrition.
Yeah, that is, I mean, honestly, one of the things that really popped out about me when I saw your profile is because I had a grandpa who just last month suffered a stroke, and he's fine now. So when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, and then just to go into the lifting aspect, but what specifically about having a stroke really inspired you to get in shape and adapt this lifestyle?
Well, it kind of started back after initially I was in a trauma center in the ICU. And then I was released to a rehab facility and I did several weeks of rehab. And then when I finished, I came home and it became my responsibility. So I started to work on trying to improve the deficits that the stroke had left me with. Initially, my left side was paralyzed. I had to learn to walk again. My left side was completely numb. I was left with epilepsy, but I bought myself a small weight set and research. I probably spent as much time online and reading, and I started lifting. And when I first started, I could only lift 2.5 to 3 pounds with my affected side. But as the weeks passed, I felt myself getting stronger. And I like that. I like that I was making progress. So
And that's just so awesome. I mean, you have such a different, like you said, a unique motivational story, because there's nothing like good old motivation when you had something that traumatic happen to you in your life, as opposed to some of our guests where they're just like, oh, I just want to lose a couple pounds, and then I just went to the gym. But it's like you really had that fire behind you where it's just like, I really need to get in shape. But what was that feeling like when you were finally able to, just like you were talking about earlier, just see those strength increases just slowly start to happen on your left side, and just realizing that you were making such a huge difference on your life?
it gave me hope that maybe I was going to beat this and I was going to be able to come out of this and rebuild my life again.
No, and that's, I mean, hope. I mean, I took a few medical classes in college. I mean, I'm a business major with a history minor, but just talking about even some placebos where, I mean, just the mind can be such a powerful tool when it comes to healing. I mean, if you have that willpower and you have that determination, I mean, it can do absolute wonders. But one of the questions that I love to ask all my health and fitness guests that I have on the podcast is, I mean, if you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape, whether it comes down to, I mean, their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what exercises they do. So many little things add up to the overall package that people end up seeing. Was that a struggle for you? I mean, obviously coming off a stroke, but when you go to the gym, just figuring out what worked best for your body, because I always say, if you're to walk up to someone and say, hey, what did you train for this body part? It looks amazing. What works best for them 99% of the time is not going to work as good for you.
Well, after I'd been lifting at home for several months, I realized that if I wanted to continue to make improvements, I needed to up my game. And that meant joining a gym. Well, I had never set foot in a gym before in my entire life. Here I am now. I'm 49 years old at the time. I've had a stroke. Seems like a logical time to join the gym. And I did. And I worked with a trainer, and he did a complete assessment of me. He assessed my range of motion, he assessed my strengths, he assessed my balance. And based on that, because of course my left side was considerably weaker than my right, he then designed a workout regimen for me to follow. So that's kind of where I started.
So, and another question that I love to ask sort of on top of that is because, everyone's genetics are different. So, what was one body part when you were getting started with the weight training in the gym? Everyone always has that one body part that really takes off, and they have that one body part that just lags behind where they have to train it into overdrive. I mean, I'll give you my examples first. I mean, my back was always really good just because I had jobs all throughout college of, working in warehouses where you had to lift and load these heavy packages. You either got a really nice back or you quit. But then also, I'm 6'3", so my legs and my lower body are just absolutely shot. Where I mean, I have to train them into overdrive just to get them to look like any semblance like I use them at all. I mean, I still have friends that still give me the jokes about, hey Ryan, you plan on working out legs anytime this year? And then I just got to tell them, I was like, believe me, I'm trying, but they just don't seem to come. But what were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
So initially, my back seemed to come along the fastest and develop the best, according to the trainer. And the area that I've had to fight the hardest and to try and develop are my shoulders. And I understand that's quite common for women. So I actually train my shoulders twice a week.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard people, I mean, that might be the number one problem area that we hear about all the time on here. It's either tied with that or sometimes it's tied with calves because that's just a genetic thing where I mean, don't even get me started on that. I always said I could inject pure muscle into my calves and they wouldn't grow an ounce. But yeah, shoulders is another thing, especially for women that we hear of a lot. But one of the things that I love to bust on this podcast is a stereotype that I mean, it's gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram, but there are just still so many women who have that fear where if they walk into the gym and they pick up one weight, they're going to put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight. And I always say to that, first of all, give me your number then, and I will pay my entire life savings just to talk to you for 5 minutes and figure out what you did. I mean, you probably get kidnapped by the government or something, and they'd probably like try to take your genetics and put them onto like every other person on the planet. I mean, it would be the biggest story of the century. I mean, obviously that's not true, but did you have that fear when you were getting started? And even if you didn't, I bet you hear that still a lot. And how do you like to respond to that?
I actually have always liked the muscular look, and that's kind of what I strive for. But I've actually seen a shift since I joined the gym. When I first started, women, cardio, 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 cardio. And now you see more and more women getting into lifting and actually wanting to build a muscular physique.
I mean, and that's just such an important thing too, because I have seen that shift too, where I mean, even when I started working out in around like 2013, so right around your time, because that's when I was graduated high school and I started to do that. I've seen that change as well. And it's so much for the better because I mean, there's so many positive ways that lifting can really have on your life. And that leads me perfectly into the next question, because I think one of the most positive things that impacts women so much more than it does guys is the confidence boost that working out gives you. I mean, we've heard so many stories from women on this podcast about how, they've made life changing decisions. I mean, it's just helped them overall in their life. And I always say that is the one thing that you can take from your life and use it to affect every single, or one thing that you can take from working out and use it to affect every single aspect of your life. I mean, obviously the fact that it helped you recover from a stroke, what other ways have you used that confidence boost to impact your life?
Just feeling comfortable in my own skin, just liking the way I look. I think we're our own worst critics a lot of the time. And I always battled with self image. I've always been thin, but just because you're thin doesn't mean you're healthy. But now, being confident to go out in a tank and shorts, even though I'm 2 months away from 53, and feeling good about the way I look.
52 and she doesn't look like a day over 26, everyone. I mean, it's just another benefit of working out. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. But yeah, just the amount of hard work that people don't realize. But one thing that I think people definitely don't pay that much attention to is the nutrition aspect of when you're living this healthy and fit lifestyle. I mean, so many people do not realize that. I mean, like the saying goes, abs are made in the kitchen, or it's like 80-20 when it comes down to, what you eat versus how you train. I mean, nutrition has such a big factor. What were some nutritional changes that you made when you started really getting in shape and really adapting this?
Once I really started getting into this and doing it seriously, I went to my trainer and spoke to him about nutrition. And he suggested the first thing I do is download an app and start logging in everything I eat. Because until you start logging it in, you're not really aware of the mistakes that you're making. And I honestly thought I was eating healthy. But after the first few days of logging in, I realized I was eating less than half the protein I should be eating. And I believe that's a big mistake that females tend to make. I was eating a lot of fruits because they're healthy. Well, guess what? Sugar. So I was eating too many carbs. And it just kind of made me accountable for what I was putting in my body and made me more aware of the foods that I was eating. I was, unfortunately, as many people do, I was eating a lot of processed foods. Well, just because it says healthy on the package does not mean it's healthy. And once you start scanning in the barcodes and seeing the numbers and seeing, well, how many grams of fat are in that food, so then it started to move me away from that and into eating more whole foods and just being more aware and using it as fuel for my body and sort of medicine for my body.
I mean, that is so true. I suffered through the same thing where I thought that I was eating enough, and then when I really finally, like, did the math and looked at it, I was like, "Wow, I'm eating way too much carbs. I'm eating way too much, all these other types of things." I mean, just figuring out that nutritional aspect is such a great help, and you mentioned that you weren't getting enough protein before. What is your go-to protein source now to help, make up for that bit difference?
So I have a protein shake every morning that I make with baby spinach. So that's my protein. I eat a lot of egg whites. I don't eat red meat. That's just a personal choice. Nothing against it. That's just a choice I've made. So I eat a lot of fish. I eat a lot of chicken. So those are kind of my go-tos to get my protein.
Yeah, I used to eat eggs all the time, but it got to a point where, I mean, my body was just so used to them that it was not going well with my digestion system. So now I had to take a break from that, but I still have, my chicken and some potatoes usually at the end, or I might have rice or something. But yeah, there's so many options for protein too. I mean, we've had some vegan bodybuilders on here. We've had some, just some vegan athletes, and just, realizing that, you don't have to just eat meat to get that in. I mean, is another thing that I love to stress on this podcast. But you're also an author too, so how long have you been an author? What inspired you to get into writing? What was that process like?
I started because of my story and what I've been through. I got asked to start giving speeches, which I started doing. And after each speech, people, you should write a book, you should write a book. And I would laugh. I mean, I barely passed high school English, so it would have to be a picture book, really. But I sat down at my computer one day and I just started typing. And before knew it, I had typed out my memoirs, basically. I was linked up with a co-author who was helping me with the process. Through social media, I met other stroke survivors, and I was then able to get their input to give them a stroke as well. And so that's kind of where it started. We're working now with some different people on securing a publisher. So hopefully, in the next few months, I'll have some good news about that.
For anyone out there who doesn't really know really what happens during a stroke, could you give us a little bit of an insight on what really happens in the body, or what happened to you at least when you had a stroke, like how that affects your health?
So as I say, my stroke was caused from a carotid dissection, and I'll explain what that is. It wasn't caused by your normal high blood pressure, overweight, et cetera, et cetera. So a carotid dissection is normally caused from a neck trauma, where there's a tear that forms in one of the carotid arteries. And what happens when you have a tear or a cut, a clot forms and went up to my brain, boom, I had my stroke. Uh, so that's what caused mine. The night that it happened, my husband heard a crash. He found me in our bedroom. I was on the floor. I was having a seizure. The left side of my body wasn't moving. The left side of my face was drooping. He knew immediately what had happened and called 911.
Wow, that's just I can't imagine what that must be like, and that's just I mean, just hearing that alone is just wow. I mean, I can't even really process what that must have been like. But going through that, I mean, I always say people that have experienced that or they've experienced trauma, I mean, a lot of cases it does make them stronger as a person. Do you feel that you've I mean, that you've sort of gotten back, I mean, that strength from the stroke, and I mean, you've sort of gotten back that willpower where, I mean, you think that that might have made you a stronger individual in the long run?
It has both physically and mentally. I have learned so many lessons from this journey, life lessons, along with my journey into fitness. So it has affected both aspects of my life that way.
And that's so awesome. And let us know first of all when you get that book done and when you get all of that figured out. And I'd love to give it a plug here on the show because I mean I bet just hearing a little snippets of your story on here. I mean I want to hear the whole thing. But you're also a registered nurse, and I love to ask nurses this because we do have probably about 30 or 40 of them I've had on the podcast. being in a fact that you work in a profession where, I mean, you sometimes see people that, have been dealt a rough hand in life. I mean, they might be, just struggling. They don't really have, that certain type of, luck that a lot of people do have, or, they're just healthy and they're fit individuals. How much more added motivation does that give you when it comes to your health and fitness, just seeing those people and just realizing that, like, hey, as of right now, I'm a strong and healthy and fit individual, and I'm blessed to be living the life that I have right now.
Unfortunately, the stroke did end my career, but however, I did go back to the hospital where I worked and volunteer as a stroke mentor. So I visit with stroke survivors that are in the hospital. Because when I was going through my recovery, I wished so desperately I could have spoken face to face with a fellow stroke survivor. Yes, I was a nurse. Yes, I had learned about stroke, but I'd never experienced it before. So I didn't know what to expect. And to be able to go and answer these people's questions and offer them hope and let them know that your life may never be the same as it was before, but you can build a fulfilling life, a happy life after experiencing a stroke.
When you go and talk to these people, or even when you go and do public speaking, what did you say is the most common question you get asked about strokes in general?
The thing about stroke is there's no definite answers when it comes to recovery. Every stroke recovery is different. Two people could have the same stroke in the same region of the brain and have two completely different outcomes. So I find that stroke survivors just want an answer. When were you able to walk again? When were you able to do this again? And I always have to say to them that just because I was doesn't mean it will necessarily happen for you. When I was going through my recovery, I often used to say, I feel like I'm in a movie and I just wish I could fast forward it to the end to see how this is all going to turn out. So it's just that element of not knowing and not being able to get answers.
Yeah, and I mean, like we were just talking about, even with like genetics too. I mean, everyone's so different. Everyone, their journey is going to be so different, and that's why I think makes it a little bit harder for people to realize, because I mean, a lot of times you just try to find a general idea of something where it's like, oh, if this happens to you, this is what's going to happen because of that. Where they don't realize, some people might be, have a very short recovery from a stroke. Some people, it might continue with them for the rest of their life, and like you said, it might be a life changing thing for them. I mean, it really does just depend on certain factors that a lot of people just don't understand about. But I mean, obviously, you're in Canada, so would you say, how is the stroke survivor community there? I mean, is it a nice community where you can go and talk to people? What is that community output like, and how important is that to you to have people that have gone through similar experiences to you to be able to talk to them?
Well, I live in a very, very small town. So there isn't a lot of, I wouldn't say support per se in our community, but with social media now, there's a whole world out there that you can reach out to stroke survivors. So I have made so many online stroke survivor friends through different forums and social media that have been a great help and support to me, and hopefully I have been to them as well.
Yeah, I mean, just having that support is just so important, whether it comes to, I mean, working out, or, just support from strokes or any other type of life events that happen. Having that support, I mean, it's been proven. It really does help people recover quicker. And it's just such a great thing to, know that, people have your back, and that, I mean, just that support alone. But going into, I mean, like you said, you've been working out for years now. One of the things that I love to talk about, because a lot of people don't realize, is that people have what are like to call beginner gains. And for people out there who aren't familiar with that term, it's basically when you first go into the gym, your body tends to react a lot. You get results a lot easier because it's something new. Your body isn't used to it. But over time, your results are going to get slowly less and less. I mean, you'll still get results, but it's just they're not going to happen at the same rate that they happen starting out. What was that like for you when that happened to you? And I mean, was it hard for you to still keep that positivity? Because like for me, when I started seeing a little bit less and less results, I was like, okay, I got to change up my training a little bit, or I got to do things different. But a lot of people don't realize that. I mean, that's just the natural part of the process. Where I mean, obviously, if you look at some of these bodybuilders that I have on my show, they're not going to go through the drastic weight loss change or the drastic change at all of someone who's just starting working out. But how did that affect you?
Um, I always kind of rely on my trainer, and when I feel like I've plateaued, or I come home and I'm not getting the soreness like I was, it's like, okay, what do I need to do? And he'll kind of give me some guidance as to, yeah, like maybe you've been doing the same routine for too long, and your body's just kind of like, I know what's coming. You need to change it up. So change, some of the exercises that I'm doing, change how many reps I'm doing, just to kind of shock the body again and get it going again.
Has your left side finally fully caught up with your right side strength wise?
For the most part, my left hand and my left foot are still completely numb. and my left hand is very weak, so I do have to use a weight strap on my left hand for anything heavier than about 10, 15 pounds, or the weight will literally fall out of my hand. When I do a lot of single arm, single leg exercises, and that's what I started my journey with. So I would do, say, bicep curls with my affected arm first, and my good arm only got to do what my left arm could do. My left arm is now able to do the same as my right, but the last few reps with my left arm take a little bit more oomph than it does my right side. So it's pretty close.
Wow, and that's just I mean, hearing just how that has still affected you, I mean, so many years later. When it comes to when you said like the feeling is numb and dead, is it I mean, I don't want to try to draw a comparison, but is it kind of like sometimes like if you fall asleep maybe like on your hand or you fall asleep on something and then you can't move it and you get that sensation? Is that sort of what it feels like?
Yeah, the best way I describe it is anyone who lives in a cold climate will don't know this would know this is if when you're out in the winter time and your hands or your feet start to get cold and they start to go numb, that's how it feels.
I am in the coldest part of the United States, being right in central Minnesota, where I mean, we had the polar vortex this last winter where it was -65 wind chill, I think, which is, I mean, you go outside for 2 minutes and you get frostbite if you don't have an uncovered area. So it's, yeah, I understand that. Unfortunately, I understand that far too well. But yeah, that's for anyone out there who's maybe listening to this in like California or Texas or any place like that. Consider yourself very lucky that you don't have to experience that. But, oh my god, yeah, I mean, we could do an entire podcast just based on, like, stories about winter weather. I mean, it's just the summertime, I absolutely love. Fall is coming, which is nice, but, I mean, that dreaded winter where, I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous, which, I mean, I love to ask a winter question as well because, I mean, you're from a climate that is similar to mine, so winter all my guests that have, rough winters, I always like to ask, how do you keep that motivation for going to the gym and, staying healthy and strong during the winter? Because I always say it's very hard to want to go to the gym where if you walk out to your car and you basically are frozen to death by the time you get to the car. I always find, I mean, luckily I have a workout place at home. I have a little, setup thing, kind of like what you had when you first got started. But I always like to say it's good enough to maintain a pump. I mean, you're not going to really gain that much, but it's always nice. Like if you really can't go to the gym, you could just go down there for, half an hour to 45 minutes. But how do you keep that motivation when basically your body's just telling you, hey, let's just stay inside and have some hot chocolate and just basically sit on the sofa all day?
I am a huge believer in setting smart goals, and that has helped get me where I am today. Every Sunday, I sit down and I write down my SMART goals for the week. And I put them on my fridge where I see them every day to remind me. So when I'm saying, it's too cold, I don't want to go to the gym, but okay, let's go to the gym. And also having a workout buddy helps. My husband reluctantly at the beginning joined me on my journey, but we are now gym buddies and we go to the gym together so we keep each other accountable. If one of us is feeling like I don't want to go today, the other one's like, okay, come on, no, we're going to the gym.
Yep, that, like I said, that can be just so important when it comes to maintaining that. I mean, I cannot tell you the amount of times I've had friends that, I mean, have really taken me out and just said, "Hey, we're going to the gym today," and I was like, "No, I don't want to go. It's too cold or blah blah blah." And they're just like, "No, we're going." But yeah, especially dealing with that cold, that can just be an extra added thing that people can try to use as an excuse. But one of the things that is not talked about at all on Instagram, or even if it is, I mean, I've never heard about it myself, is sleep. I mean, sleep is one of the most important things, if not the most, well, it's the most important thing when it comes to recovery, but just overall, it is so important. I mean, I cannot stress enough how much a good night of sleep really does for the body. I mean, first of all, I had the number one sleep specialist on the planet come on the podcast, and we talked about, the importance of sleep. And he was from the UK, so he was from Oxford, and he had one of those British accents where you just felt like you gained 10 IQ points just from talking to him. Where I was just telling him, I was like, "You're going to talk the entire time, and I'm going to listen. I'm not going to say a word because literally my brain is getting a workout just hearing you talk." But we were talking, and I was talking about how I have all these health and fitness guests that come on, and how important sleep is to that. But what is the recommended amount of sleep that you try to get, and what are some tips and tricks that you try to get the proper amount of sleep? Because I always say, if I'm a 6 to 8 hour guy. If I get anything less than 6, it's going to be very, very hard for me to work out that day just because I need my beauty sleep. But what do you like to try to recommend? And are there any tips and tricks that you like to use in order to get that proper amount of sleep?
So because I now have a brain injury from the stroke, I actually need extra sleep. And I get what is called neurofatigue. So it's kind of like a mental fatigue that anyone would get, but because my brain is compensating for an injury, it hits me harder. So if I get less than 7 hours sleep a night, I am done. I can barely function. But I have a routine that helps me with my sleep. I meditate. A lot of times, if I'm really stressed out, I'll meditate before I go to bed. That kind of, gets me into that space and helps me to calm down. No TV, no electronics, just to kind of let the brain slow down a little bit. And if I do get into that mode, that happens a lot at night where you start to relive every bad decision you've made, and to try
Been
and
there.
use those meditation techniques to try and take control of the thoughts and quiet the brain down so you can drift off to sleep.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot tell you the amount of times, I've been trying to lay and sleep in bed, and I'm just thinking about, why did I do that thing in 4th grade with that thing with that person? It was like, why did I make that decision with that? I mean, I've had so many times where that's happened to me. I was like, just let me go to sleep, please. But I unfortunately, I'm a millennial, so with my technology, it's sometimes hard for me to put the phone away and just, shut that off. But I find that for me personally, that is such a great thing to do when it comes to getting sleep. I mean, it's just to get that technology away because, believe me, I work nights, so sleep is a little bit weirder for me where, I mean, I have people that they talk about, they get up at like 4 in the morning. I'm going to bed usually at 4 in the morning. So it's a completely different thing for me. But two of the questions that I love to ask all my health and fitness guests that come on the podcast, I mean, the first one, I mean, there were so many positive things that happened to me, from working out and getting bigger and stronger. But one of the negative things is that you're going to get asked to move a lot of people's furniture. You're gonna get asked to open a lot of pickle jars or bottled water or anything that's sealed on tight. I mean, I'm still at home with my parents for the next 2 months before I move out, and every single time they bring home groceries, I basically have to lift the car into the driveway and carry in the groceries, being the good son that I am. Has that been any similar experiences with you where, I mean, people see that obviously you work out and you're in the gym where all of a sudden they're asking you to do favors that they might not have asked you to do before?
No, not really, because I think they understand that I have enough challenges. Even though I'm 6 years out from my stroke, I still struggle some days. Some days my brain decides I don't want to work for you today, and I struggle a lot with things. So, no, I don't get asked that a lot.
I was gonna say that person would be kind of a bad person. I mean, if they're like, "Hey, Angie, come and help me lift this, lift this refrigerator, help me lift this chair, or whatever," knowing that. But yeah, I mean, I always say for me, it's a double-edged sword. Being 6'3", I could have zero muscle at all, and they'd still say, "Oh, tall guy, come here and help us move this stuff." But one thing that I also, I mean, the other question that, I mean, I just, again, it's a multi-million dollar idea, but when it comes to, fit women, your clothing options can be limited at times. I mean, I always love to say guys have their own limitations, but for women specifically, I mean, if you have big, broad shoulders, dresses aren't your best friend. Jeans are another thing that we have all the time where you have a big lower body and a small waist. Jeans are not made for that. And the fact that, I mean, well, especially for some of the competitors, you have to have like two wardrobes, your prep and, your off season. But I mean, just being into health and fitness, you're going to need to, change up your wardrobe a bit because your body is not going to look the same. What have been some ways that you have found that you're able to compensate for the fact that you can have limited clothing options at times?
Uh, Thank God for leggings. Thank goodness for leggings. And they also make jeggings now because I have trouble with regular jeans because of my quads. And if I get them to fit my quads, they're about 4 inches too big on my waist. So I have to wear a belt with everything. And sometimes sweaters, and that can be a little tight in the shoulders. So yeah, it is difficult sometimes to purchase clothes that fit.
And if you were walking down the street, what do you think would be the body part that people would notice first about you, or the body part that you get the most comments on?
If I'm out dressed like that in the winter, obviously nothing because I've got 12 layers of clothing on. But in the summer, my arms.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I have encountered a few rude comments from people out in public. I have too many muscles for a woman. You look like a man. It's like whatever. But it doesn't bother me. That's their issue, not mine.
Okay, we're gonna solve this problem right now. Can you give us a front double bicep real quick? And I was gonna say, does she look like Dwayne the Rock Johnson, or does she look like Hulk Hogan? Everyone, look at that. Does she look like that? I mean, that's just hard work and dedication. I mean, I always say that whenever we have guests on like that. It's like, honestly, there's a big difference, and that's just, I mean, if they think that that looks like a man, then you got to respond to them. Well, then what do you look like? Or then are you a man basically? Then because it's a lot of times it's people that have self confidence issues, and it's just, yeah, I find that so fascinating when we get those type of comments. But yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I think it has gotten a lot better from maybe where it was, when I was a lot younger. But I mean, still, yeah, just to hear those comments, and people just don't realize, like I said, the hard work that it takes to even look anything like that and to maintain that. I mean, it's just to call that out. I mean, I always say it's always funny where we live in a society where if you to say something like that to someone who's overweight, you would be publicly shunned and everyone would, like, hate you. But if you say that to someone who's in shape, I mean, there's not that much backlash. I mean, you can sort of get away with it. Where I just find that funny. Where and that's especially true for when the comments go to women. But yeah, I just find that so fascinating. But I mean, hopefully, I mean, I think things are changing. But so I think that is definitely a positive thing. But now we go to the audience favorite, and my personal favorite part of the podcast, a little questionnaire, where I'm going to ask Angie here about a half a dozen or so health and fitness related questions that we ask all of our guests and see how our answers stack up to everyone else. They're not rocket science questions. I made sure that I made them easy, because we've had like Swedish guests, we've had Finnish guests on here, and I make them easy enough so that anyone who has just a basic understanding of English can really understand. But what is one for the first question? What is one item that you always need to have in your fridge at all times?
Baby spinach.
You trying to go Popeye on us?
Yeah, I put it in my smoothie every morning.
Yeah.
That and egg whites.
Okay, so you're going to be like our 270th guest when this gets posted. That's the first time that we've ever heard baby spinach on this podcast. So we learn something new every day, everyone, and we get new answers on this questionnaire every single time we have a guest. So yeah, that is definitely a first. So anyone baby spinach out there, and egg whites is, obviously that's one answer that we get all the time. But now, out of all of your followers that you have on Instagram, what do you think would be one thing that they would be most surprised to find out about you if they met you in person?
Just how much I still struggle with everyday life. People assume that because I'm looking physically healthy, that I've recovered 100% from my stroke. So I think they would be surprised to discover that some days I struggle to get dressed, and just how much I still do struggle day to day.
When you're talking about those struggles that you go through day to day, as the years have gone on, have the struggles become less and less, or is it still kind of at the same that it was maybe like a year or two ago?
Oh no, way, way, way better. When I first got home, I couldn't do anything for myself. My husband basically had to do everything. Now I can do most of the household chores, but I still have days, especially as I say, when I don't get enough sleep, that I just can't. I'm done.
Yep. I mean, like I always gotta say, the hardest day of my entire life when it comes to working out was I had pulled an all-nighter the night before to finish writing up a paper, and when I got to the gym, I did about half my workout, and I was like, I can't even do this. Like, I'm just so dead tired. So I mean, yeah, when that comes to not getting the proper amount of sleep, I mean, I can totally understand where someone's like, I haven't got enough sleep tonight. I was like, go to bed, first of all. I mean, just go and catch up on that sleep. I mean, that is just such an important thing. But if we were to talk to you a year from today, what are some goals that you would like to have achieved when it comes to, I mean, just your life, I mean, your health and fitness journey? What are some goals that you would like to have achieved if we were to talk a year from today?
So the first goal, of course, would be hopefully my book will be published and will help stroke survivors out there from my journey and what I've learned. But as far as my health and fitness, I don't have any actual goals, but I hope to keep building on what I've built so far and keep learning more and more about nutrition, because the more I learn about nutrition and the more I'm able to feel my body, the better I feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the endorphin boost and the confidence that we were talking about before that you can get from, living this lifestyle. I cannot stress it enough for people out there who are thinking about it. And a question that I ask every single guest, whether they be, my bodybuilders or, my musicians, for my musicians, I ask, what advice do they have people to get started, becoming a musician? But for health and fitness, I always find that just taking that first step into the gym and getting that first workout in is the hardest thing for people, just because they have all these fears about, what's going to happen at the gym, or they just don't know, what's going to happen to their body, like we were talking about before. But what piece of advice do you like to give people if, they've ever come up to you and said, Angie, we I want to adapt a healthy and fit lifestyle too, but I'm just, I don't know what to do. I've always found that for me specifically, because I got a little bit of OCD where, I mean, if it's 7 o'clock that I plan my workout and it's 7:02, I got to wait for it to be like 7:15 then, because it's a round number. Or if, like, let's say tomorrow I wanted to start a whole new workout routine, I would have to wait until Monday, because Monday's the start of a week. It's just, I'm just wired weird like that. But I found that, I cannot walk into a gym and not get a workout in. I mean, just taking those steps into the gym has really helped me. But what advice do you like to give people who, might come up to you and say, hey, I really want to get started, but I'm having trouble finding that motivation and that confidence?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to start making changes gradually. A lot of people try and change everything all at once. They try and change their eating, they try and change their exercising, they get overwhelmed and they end up quitting. So start with some small changes, maybe, reel in your diet a little bit, start eating a little healthier, then start maybe exercising at home, work up to the gym if you don't feel comfortable, do your research, go around to different gyms, find one that you feel good in. I did that before I joined. I went to a couple, and when I went to the one I joined, it was like, no, this is the place. This is the place. So take your time and do your research, and just don't kind of jump head first into it. Know what you're getting yourself into.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And then again, like we were talking about before, go with a friend if you can too. That can really help with motivation. But a thing that people don't talk about as well is the gym culture that exists. I mean, when you go to a gym, it can become a community of sorts where I mean you can develop friends there. I mean, it's like its little own family. How important is that gym community in the gym that you go to for you, just knowing that you have that support system and people really do seem to care about each other when they're in the gym?
Going to the gym does as much for me mentally and psychologically as it does physically. When I go there, it's a small community, as you say, you get to know the regulars, we support each other, we learn from each other, we help each other, we encourage each other, we have laughs, we're working hard, but we still laugh. I come out of there some days, I've had a horrible day, I've struggled all day, and I come out of there, I feel great, I've had a few laughs, I've had a chance to socialize, I've gotten in a good workout, and I just feel wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, just that those benefits alone are just that community too. I mean, a lot of people they struggle to find that in their life, but I mean, if you go to the gym too, that can really be another positive thing. I mean, just on the checklist of positive things that can happen. But now, if you were able to go back in time and talk to the 18-year-old version of yourself, what would be the best piece of advice you would give her?
You are stronger than you think.
Yep. No, I would well, first of all, I would give myself, invest a little bit in Google, invest a little bit in Amazon, get that stuff done first of all. I mean, maybe make some bets on some sports games that you might know a little bit ahead of time, but other than that, yeah, I would say that too. And also, the things in life at that point that you thought that were so important are not that important. I mean, when you're that young, you think that everything is, world changing and that, every decision that you make is going to have, just these drastic effects, but I mean, just go with the flow and, just let things come to you. But now, is there anyone that you would like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
I have to say to my husband, who he has supported me through my recovery. He has supported me with some of the harebrained ideas that I've gotten since my stroke running a 5K. I've competed. So he's always, whenever I say, I want to do this, he's right there with me and he's my support.
Well, now I gotta ask, add a few more questions because what was that experience like running that 5K?
Uh, it was a lot of work to get to it. I didn't run before my stroke. I used to say, if you see me running, run to some bad's happening.
Yep.
But just to cross that finish line, knowing that I'd been paralyzed and I had been in a wheelchair and I just ran a 5K was such an incredible feeling.
I mean, just I've run a few 5Ks in my life too, and I didn't have to suffer through anything that you were doing, and that's just hard enough on me. So I mean, just going through that with all of the added things that you've went through, I mean, that's just such a great thing. And I think that really does prove to people that I mean, if you put your mind to something, I mean, you can accomplish anything that you want. And again, you guys, we cannot thank you, Angie, enough for being on the podcast and sharing your story. I mean, it's just so great having you on. And I think it really does bring a lot of hope to people that might have suffered through, life-changing events in their life that I mean, you can come back and you can, make your life for the better. And I mean, it's just such a positive thing. And definitely, like I said, let me know when that book is going to get released. And I'd love to give it a shout out on the podcast here. I mean, I love to help out the guests that I have on and just honestly just keep doing what you're doing. And everyone go and give her a follow on Instagram. I'll leave a link to her profile down below. I mean, just seeing some of these posts that she makes, first of all, it's going to make you want to get off the couch and stop eating those Twinkies and, go to the gym maybe a little bit more. But I mean, it's just such a positive thing just to see how you have taken, that those life events that you've had and just turned it into something that I mean you're going to be helping so many people and you've already helped out so many people and I mean I cannot thank you enough for your time to come on this podcast and share your story.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So again, you guys, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out everyone.